let's take a look at our tile set and placing buildings. Alright, for the tile set today, I went ahead and I just found one of the RTS sets from Kenny. I am using the sci-fi one, and that is KENNEY.NL. And he's got a lot of great assets that are free to use, as well as paid assets, 2D and 3D, as well as UI that you might want to use as well. A bunch of different buttons and input prompts that, if they fit the style of your game, fantastic. That'll save you from having to make a bunch of buttons, for example. Or if you're making touch buttons for a mobile game, you can already have these arrows and buttons to display on screen just immediately without having to put in any extra work. Alright, so I'm using the sci-fi RTS set, and in there you get the tile set, you get the individual PNGs, you can get the vectors so you can resize them all to whatever it is that you want to do. And for me, I'm just using the PNGs here. The tile set would work as well, but I just prefer my individual PNGs, even if it does mean my project would be a little larger in size. But alright, so the first thing we need to do is we need to create a tile map and at least lay out some land here for us to place things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over into my tree, and the first thing I'm going to do is get a tile map node. In the inspector, I'm going to go to my tile set, say new, and then I'm going to open that up. The tile size is, I believe, 64 by 64 for these tiles. And now I can focus at the bottom of the screen. I can bring this up and we can focus purely on creating the tiles. So the first thing we're going to do is, I've gone ahead and pulled this up so we can get a better view. I'm going to go down to the very bottom. We have tile map selected. I'm going to click on tile set. And then I'm just going to go through my files. So I'm going to go ahead and find tiles, and I'm just going to shift click all of my options here, all my PNGs, and drag them in. Automatically create tiles, yes. Alright, so now that I've done that, it's already created everything the way it needs. So like the texture region, 64 by 64, it's already created all that for me based on each of my tiles. Now if you wanted to use a tile set, for example, if you were using that, let's say you wanted to use a tile sheet that you brought in, you can go ahead and if you hit the plus down there, you could always add atlas and scene collection there, but I'm just going to drag the tile sheet in, and again this will pop up. Would you like to automatically create the tiles? I'm going to say yes, and as you can see, we already have our tiles ready to just select and start using immediately, and I'll say yes. Okay, so once you have your tiles, then you can go ahead and you could just start drawing on them. Now some of these you may want to set up a little differently, but alright, now the way that I was referring to when it comes to modifying this is, for example, we have these like roads here, but of course we can't place them in the same spot. If you see, if we go to the tile map, we place some of our dirt, and if we try to place one of these roads manually, for example, you'll see that it'll overwrite it. So in order to fix that, of course, there are these versions that kind of have them merged together, so you could always use those. But what I would like to do, preferably, is go ahead inside of my tile map, inside the inspector, find the layers section, and I would give this a name. For example, we could say ground, and then I'll hit add element, and I can add another one such as roads. And now I can come down to my dirt, make sure I'm on ground in my drop down, draw these in. Then I can grab my road, and from the drop down I can select my other layer of roads, make sure to select your tile, and I can place it directly on top. And as you see, when we're in game, you can't tell that they're two separate objects within the same tile set. So with using that system, you can go ahead and layer objects. All right, so I've gone in and I've just filled this up with dirt. And if we take a look, we can see my blue line for my viewport kind of ends right there. So I've gone past that in 3 out of my 4 directions. And if we were to take a look at this with it running now, we can see we can move along. Everything works nicely. And now that we actually have a size for our tiles, and our objects are probably going to be about the same size as one tile, you can go back and now you can edit your camera and decide how far you want to be able to zoom out and zoom in. And of course, if you want to wait until after we start placing things so you can get a better idea, you can always wait until then as well. And now you can go ahead and decide a little more on those limits that we talked about last time. Alright, so what do we need in order to place an object? Well, I'm going to go ahead and create a new scene. I'm going to call it other node. Select a sprite 2D for my main. We're going to need an area 2D. That area is going to need a collision shape. And my sprite is also going to need a timer. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is we need to take a look at the sprite. And I'm just going to select a building out of my structure folder. Let's see. Which one of these do I want to use? Alright, so I think I'm going to use this one here, Sci-Fi Structure 7. And I haven't assigned that to the texture to my sprite yet, but I can see when looking at it, we can see just how blurry this is. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that since we're working with pixels here. So I'm going to go to my project settings and I'm going to go ahead and take a look for filter. This should be under textures, under rendering, default. We'll change that to nearest. And there we go. Now we have our sharp pixel sprites. And now that we have that, I can go ahead and delete that. Go to my sprite 2D. Grab structure 7 and pull it into my texture. Alright. And now that we have that selected, we can go ahead and create our collision shape. Of course, all we need is a rectangle. I'm going to go ahead and name this and call this my research building. I'm going to save this with Control S, go into my scenes folder, and research building. That's fine. And I'll go ahead and don't want to add the script yet. Sure, let's go ahead. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and add a script. Do we need to add it to the building? Not for that. So I'm going to go back to my main scene. And just to show this, I can go ahead and get rid of that icon. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do a little bit of the UI here. So I'm going to do a canvas layer. And in this, I'm going to go ahead and put an HBox container. So it's going to be horizontal across. I'm going to set my anchors to bottom wide. And I just realized I probably want that inside of a scroll box. That way, or sorry, a scroll container. That way in the future, it will just continuously scroll. So I'm going to have to set the anchor for that. Whoops. And just do what we just did. So I'm just going to go ahead and select bottom wide. And then for my scroll container, go ahead and increase layout, transform, set that to 70. And if we were to take a look at that with our HBox, alright, so I went ahead and just added a texture rect inside of my HBox and just gave it the same sprite as my building. And as you can see, whoops, there is how that would look. And if we were to run that, you can see we have room for all of our buildings and we can just scroll along the bottom there. Now with it being that low, I might want to move it higher up just so I can actually scroll better, or you might even want to put it on one of your sides. That would work too. But you see, now I can go to the bottom and I can pull across without necessarily scrolling. So that'll work as well. That'll be up to you ultimately on how you want to go about doing that. But we can see there, that's an idea of how it would look. I'm going to go ahead and delete those because we don't need them. And can I actually set this to be in the... That would go in the center, but I guess does it really matter? No, I guess it doesn't really. Alright, so I've just gone ahead and I made mine look just a little prettier. So inside my canvas layer, I have a control node. And inside of that, I have a color rect for the background. Then, of course, my scroll container with the H-box and our texture rect. Now, I'm just going to name this control the... so I want to call it the placement or item box. For now, it's called item box. That'll be fine. Or the build items, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Alright, so with that, we have that set. And now we need to be able to select each object. Alright, so the first thing I did is I went ahead and renamed my texture rect being a placement object. And I'm going to add a script to it. And make sure that goes into the right place. Great. And I'm going to have some exported variables here. Export var. We want to put this as... you know what? Let's just make it a path. So let's just export a path, or do we have to? No, it's node path. Sub group. We might have to go with directory for this. And this would be object. Oh, wait, we can't do that. Placement object would take advantage for us here. Let's see. Not exactly. We do have mouse entered, mouse exit, which we can use. GUI input should be nice. But I'm pretty sure that's going to get input even if we're not clicking directly onto it. But let's go ahead and check. All right, so we'll connect it to itself. And just to test, I'm going to go ahead and print, say, clicked me, and just test that out. So if I'm way up here, clicking, we're getting nothing. And if I, yeah, see, that's the problem. It's taking all input, so it doesn't have to be a click. So we're going to say if, and this is an event. Okay. Right, so looking at my options here, I went ahead and just created a left click inside the input map, just like we did with our scroll up and down in the previous video. Only I made one for my left click. So now I can just say if event is action released. Now notice we're using released here because if we have it pressed, we're going to be doing this action or this block of code continuously, and we don't want to do that. So we're just going to do it on release. So if we were to run that and take a look, we can click around out here, nothing happens. And as soon as we click on the item, it says clicked me. And if we press down on our building and we move our mouse off, we release. We can see we still did get that click me, but that's not a huge deal for us in this case. So what we would want to do here is we're now going to create an instance of a ghost image, which is going to be our blueprint. All right, so what we're using here is we're using three variables. We're going to use one for the placement object, one for a blueprint, and one for the main node. Of course, main node, mine is just called node 2D. And that's just the root node of my main scene here. I could change it to main, and I probably would in the future, but at the moment it's just called node 2D. Placement object is a packed scene, and that's going to be, in our example here, our building, our research building. And our blueprint is going to be a separate scene here. It's just going to be a sprite 2D. This texture will be replaced, but for the time being, this is what we're going to use. Or at least I just put that in there just to make sure that it's working. And that has a script on it, and all that is a process function that's saying, hey, your position is equal to the mouse. So this way it's going to be following our mouse around. Now, what I should also do here is to make it clear that it is a blueprint. What you could do is go on into visibility, self-modulate, and partially make it transparent just by dropping the alpha. That's going to be personal choice. And back into our texture rect of our placement object script. On our GUI input, we check if we release left click. We're going to create an instance of our blueprint. We're going to create an instance of that placement object. And we're going to get the text, set the texture of our blueprint instance to the texture of the object we loaded. And then we're simply just going to get tree root and get our main node. And we're doing it this way just so that we don't have to send a signal up for something as simple as just adding this to the scene. And no matter where this is in our tree, this specific line here is still going to work exactly the same. And we're just calling add child for our blueprint instance. So now when we're in here, and as soon as we click on the object, we have both of our instances happening. The blueprint instance is being added to the scene, so we can see it. And the texture of our blueprint instance is being set to the texture of the object that we loaded. And as you see, there it is, and it is following our mouse. All right, so now we can go around, and we're able to go ahead and click because we've now entered placement mode, right? Essentially. So now we'll be able to click wherever we want and place an object. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and close that. So now that we have that, all we need to do is actually place the object. And to do that, I think we can actually go into our main node and handle that here. So let's go ahead and place this in the correct location scripts. Create var placement mode bool is false. My placement object, once we do this, I'll go ahead and again get tree root get node. Place. Did I not save it? Pretty sure I did though. Oh, I'll go ahead and grab it anyway. Save that. Boom, placement mode equals true. And for this, it might be better if we actually create a signal and just send it up that way. But for now, just to make sure this works, we're just going to do this instead of playing with signals. So when this is true, that's when things are going to change, right? So we're going to say, go into our process, and we're saying if placement mode. So when this is true, then we can look for whatever it is that we're looking to do. And in this case, can we do it in process? We can actually probably get away with it in input. What, an underscore at start of event, because I don't think we're going to need that. we'll say if placement mode. All right, so it's only going to trigger when we're in placement mode. If input dot is action. Oops, that's a capital I for input. Is action. We can go with just press or just release here. I'm going to go with just press for this case. Left click. And then we're going to go ahead and place our object. So the thing is we need to have our object. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and pass. And we already have the object. So if we have it loaded, we just need to know which of these objects or which of those scripts, right? Which of these scripts is holding the object that we need. So I think we are going to go ahead and send a signal up anyway. So we'll go ahead back to my placement and I'll create a new signal. This is going to be a what do we want to call it? Let's say placement mode enabled. Right. And we can go ahead and, if I'm not mistaken, we do use parentheses here if we want to pass in an object with it or have a mandatory item go with it. And we'll call this, I would just say obj, right? And this will be something. In our case, I believe we're just going to use sprite 2Ds. Whoops. My fingers were way off on the keyboard there, so we'll just call it a sprite 2D. So now instead of calling this placement mode true, we'll go ahead and just emit our signal. Placement mode enabled. And pass in the argument. And that argument being our object instance. Right? That's how we're going to go about this. Yeah, I think this should work. So we'll go ahead and just send our instance object up. So now that we have this signal, I'm going to have to connect this as well. So we'll create a ready function in our object here so we can go ahead and connect. And different ways that we can connect signals here. So I believe it's our self, so we'll just say connect placement object enabled. It's going to be a callable, and that's not going to go to self. That's going to go to main node. So go ahead and just get tree.root.get node. And that's actually pretty long. So wonder if we can actually just shorten this up here. And if that'll work for us here. Yeah, you're not a string anymore, it's going to be a node 2D. And that means we can just get rid of all that and just say main node. All right, so we'll see if that works. And the function that we're going to connect this signal to is, let's call it placement enabled, placement enabler, placement mode enabler. Go back to our main scene, create our function. Right. Now remember, this takes an argument, and that argument is an object type sprite 2D. So first thing we'll do is we'll set placement mode equal to true. And we'll create a var object, placeable object, sprite 2D. Set that. Placeable object. God damn it. Placeable object equals obj. And then when we click, should be able to just do add child and put our placeable object. Now we should also set its position. We can do that before or after we add the child. Doesn't matter. And this is going to go at placeable object global position is able to get our mouse's global position. And then to finish it off, we'll set placement mode back to false. All right, so if we run that and take a look, let's see. Okay, we're gonna have to just go ahead and set it as an on ready, and I have a ready function there, so I could just put it down there if I wanted to, but there we go. All right, so now our ghost is following. We can click. There's our placement object, and we cannot place another one. I mean, technically, we could in theory if we didn't get rid of the placement object, but now we got to get rid of that blueprint as well. Now, how do we get rid of that blueprint? Well, we can do it multiple different ways. Now, we could come into, where am I going? My placement object, and we can send another object with it. Right, and I think that's the way I'm going to go about it. So I'm just going to call BP for blueprint, and this is also just a sprite 2D. All right, so that means I'm going to have to pass in addition, my blueprint instance. All right. That means in my main node, I'm going to need a second argument for that signal connection. There. So we'll call this blueprint. It is a sprite 2D. And we'll go ahead, we'll say blueprint equals BP. And now we can just say blueprint dot q3. Now we can click, place, and we're good. Now we can overlap them, so we probably want to avoid doing that as well. And the way we can do that is simply checking if we have any overlapping areas. All right, so to cover this, I'm just going to go to my blueprint, add an area 2D and a collision shape, and I'm just going to connect an area entered and area exit to my blueprint script here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and modify my colors with this. So I'm going to go back to my 2D so I can actually see what's going on, and create two variables: var place color. This of course is going to be a color, and that's going to be that color. Now I put in there the one that I chose. I don't remember if I have to put the number sign in there, gonna be honest. And the can't place color, I'll go ahead and tweak as well. Place that. All right. So initially on ready, I'm gonna say self modulate equals place color. And here's our enter and exit. So when another area enters or exits, we should check if more areas are colliding with it. All right, so every time an object exits the area, we're going to go ahead and we'll check. We'll say if has overlapping areas. Telling me that is wrong. Why is that? Function is right there. Oh, because I'm doing this on the blueprint, right? So we actually have to get the area. So if area 2D dot has overlapping areas, return. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and change our color. Right. So if there are every time an area exits our blueprint, right? So this is when our blueprint and another area are not overlapping anymore. And remember, our buildings have an area, so that's where our detection is going to come from. If nothing else is overlapping, then we can go ahead and place our object. Now, when an object enters our area, we can instantly just go ahead and set it to can't place color. All right, so let's take a look at, whoops, that's not what we want. We want to go to our main scene and then run that and take a look at what we have now. So if I click that, we can see it's green. We're all good. I place. All right, cool. Everything disappeared. Our building placed. I grab another one. We're green. And as soon as I overlap this building, it should turn to a red. There it is. Now, when it's red, I can still place it. So we do need to tweak that. And to do that, all we'll do is we can just simply add one more variable here. Can place as a bool equals false, but actually it's going to be true by default. Right? And if an area enters, can place will equal false. And on exit, if we don't have anything else overlapping, it'll be true. Now to fix this in our main script, before we add a child, all we have to do is check our blueprint. Right? So if blueprint dot can place, and just tab all that in. And I spelled that right, correct? Yes, small c, big P. So now in our main scene, we can take a look. Click, place, click. It's red, and we can no longer place. When it's green, we can place it. And we can't get any space in between there, so that's getting a little specific. With that, you can just tweak your area sizes and such. That's basically what's happening here, right? We're getting an area detection. So as you can see, we can go ahead and place them as long as they're not too close together. All right. Now we should also make sure that this works if we have multiple different objects to place. So I'm just going to create another test object real quick, and we'll make sure that there's no issues. All right, so I've gone ahead. I just created another object. I saved my placement object from inside my HBox. Just right-clicked it and save branch as scene. That way I can just instance this in for as many objects as I need for the game. And my second object, I changed the placement object export a variable to be my new scene, right? My hangar scene now for the second one. And I changed the texture on the texture rect, and we could probably automate that. And we'll take a look at doing that right after this, as soon as we make sure this works. We can run it. Boom, we can grab our research, place it, grab another research, it's red, it's cool. Green we can place, and we grab our hanger, and as you see, we get in the area we cannot, it's red, so we got overlapping areas, and green we can place. All right, awesome. So that's working perfectly fine. Now let's take a look at how we can automate this. So to make sure that this is automating, I'm going to go ahead and just set the texture of our objects here to the Godot icon, just so that we can make sure everything works, and we can do this inside of our ready function. And all we're going to do is basically take a look at our instances and load in the texture, just like we're doing down here. And if we're doing that, then we could probably just move these variables up here to begin with. Blueprint inst and object inst. Right? And we could just remove that. And actually, do we need the object inst? Yeah, because we don't need to place the object. We just need the blueprint. Or do we? No, because the blueprint doesn't have a texture. Yeah. Alright, so we need our object ints as well. And we're basically just going to move these lines up into our ready. That way we have that. Oops, my mistake there. There we go. Just so we have that already set, and that should happen, well, right when we load up our game, right? So we should be good when it comes to that. And hopefully that's it. It might cause an issue. Take a look. Okay, that doesn't set, right? We gotta set our self as well. Self.texture. Is equal to our blueprints texture. Okay, so those now set themselves, and we can still place things into the world. And yeah, that does become the issue there when we're creating a new instance. So we're gonna have to create a new instance anyway down here. Snow. Go ahead to. Well, that's not right. It places right though. But we need the texture here as well set. Okay, so we need it in both locations, just because we need to create a new instance when it comes to this. And if that's the case, then we can go ahead and delete both of these. That way we don't just have it hanging around and using up our resources. We can basically load it, get the information we need, the textures, and move on. And while I'm looking at it, if that's the case, then we can probably just get it with the object, right? Change this to just self.texture. And then there's no blueprint for us to free here. And we just need the object. There we go. Take a look. We don't need that. We're setting our texture. There we go. So our objects have been set. Our blueprint is set properly. Cannot overlap, but we can still place our objects. And there we go. I know this one was a lot longer than normal, but we did set up a tile set, a basic tile set for us. We have a placement system. We have 2 buildings, And next time we'll go ahead and take a look at how the buildings, or making the buildings function or do things. Which is simple. We just got to modify the script or put a script on them. But alright, take care. Episode's a good one. I know this was a long one. Hopefully, if I didn't already, somewhere up in the corner would be a link for you to go ahead and click on if you want to do a different type of placement system, one that's using the tile set to have a grid-based system.